The autumn leaves colored the gardens of Chestnut Hill, Boston's upscale neighborhood, signaling the end of fall. Elizabeth Foster gazed at the beautiful scenery outside her window and sighed. The quiet atmosphere of this town gave her peace. It had been a year since Charles passed away. Their 10 years of marriage had gone by like a dream. She took off her bathrobe and began changing into her work uniform. Looking at herself in the mirror, Elizabeth smiled slightly. An emerald green apron with a name tag. The words "Fresh Mart" were embroidered on it. No one knew, but Charles had left her an enormous inheritance. $50 million. It was the total assets of the real estate investment company he had built with his own talents. It was the hidden side of the man whom Bostonians thought of as a modest engineer. The phone rang, pulling Elizabeth out of her thoughts. Looking at the caller ID, she saw it was from her mother, Martha Green. "Elizabeth, don't forget about dinner tonight. 6 o'clock. Martha's voice had that refined tone typical of the upper class. "Of course I remember, Mom. But I might be a little late. Work ends at 5. There was a slight silence on the other end of the line. "Are you still doing that part-time job?" Martha's voice was clearly disapproving. "Mom, this isn't a part-time job. I'm a full-time employee. I'm working as a cashier at Fresh Mart now." "But you have Charles's insurance money, don't you? Why would you do such?" Martha hesitated for a moment, choosing her words. "Such a job." Elizabeth laughed lightly. "Charles's insurance money is plenty. But I want to keep busy. Besides, it's fun meeting new people." The truth was, Elizabeth's family had no idea how wealthy her husband had been. They had only met Charles a few times and considered him, a plain man from a middle-class family, inadequate as Elizabeth's spouse. When Charles died, her parents and sister attended the funeral but never asked detailed questions about his estate. They simply said, "You can probably get by on the insurance money. Your father and sister will be surprised that you're doing such common work," Martha continued. Elizabeth gave up arguing further. "I'll be there at 7. Mom." After hanging up, Elizabeth took a deep breath. She looked at Charles's photo and smiled. "They still don't understand, Charlie. But it's okay. I have my promise to you." She got into her car and headed to Fresh Mart. What she had valued most in her marriage to Charles wasn't material wealth, but their very presence in each other's lives. Just before his death, he had made her promise, "I want you to cherish people who love you for who you are, not for your money." At Fresh Mart, her colleagues welcomed her warmly. Working there strangely gave her a sense of fulfillment. Especially the daily conversations with many local residents soothed her heart. After finishing work, Elizabeth headed to her parents' mansion. The Green family was prominent in Boston society. Her father Robert was a famous architect, and her mother Martha served as a trustee of an arts foundation. Her sister Victoria was a successful lawyer, married to a man from a wealthy family. Opening the front door, she found the whole family already seated at the dining table. When Elizabeth entered in her uniform, the atmosphere in the room seemed to freeze. "Oh, Elizabeth?" Martha looked her daughter up and down, her expression clouding. "Did you come directly from the store?" "Yes, I didn't have time to change," Elizabeth replied, maintaining her composure. Victoria let out a small sigh. "Couldn't you have a little more pride? You're a daughter of the Green family." Robert put down his wine glass and spoke with a stern expression. "Elizabeth, we have built our social standing over generations. Your working as a supermarket cashier damages the family's honor." Elizabeth listened to their words in silence. In her heart, anger and sadness intermingled. What would Charles think of this situation if he were alive? He always said, "A person's worth cannot be measured by their occupation or possessions." "I take pride in my work," she finally answered quietly. "Elizabeth." Martha raised her voice. "You're shameless. Do you intend to bring shame to this family?" Victoria agreed. "What do you think will happen if my friends find out?" Victoria's sister is a supermarket cashier. Robert stood up and declared in an authoritative voice, "Elizabeth, if you continue with that job, I'd prefer you not come to this house anymore. You're a disgrace to our family." Elizabeth quietly stood up. There were tears in her eyes, but her voice was steady. "I understand." She left the house without another word. Elizabeth's apartment was in a quiet residential area, a little away from the upscale neighborhood of Chestnut Hill. From the large living room window, she could see the greenery of the park. The space was modest but warm, decorated according to her own taste. As morning light brightened the room, Elizabeth was preparing for work. A week had passed since the falling out with her family, but there had been no calls or visits. She had expected this. The Green family were people who valued their pride above all else. At Fresh Mart, the warm atmosphere greeted her as usual. "Good morning, Elizabeth. Looking forward to working with you today." The manager, James, greeted her with a smile. He highly valued Elizabeth's diligence and trusted her. "Good morning, James. I'll do my best today as well." While at the register, Elizabeth enjoyed conversations with regular customers, the elderly Johnson couple, the young family with 3 children, Professor Parker. They appreciated Elizabeth's kind service, and she found joy in these interactions. Meanwhile, at the Green household, a different story was unfolding. Martha was surrounded by friends at a Boston Arts Association luncheon. Elizabeth is traveling in Europe. After her period of mourning, she needed a change of scenery. Martha raised her wine glass and smiled elegantly. The women around her nodded in understanding. None of them could imagine that her eldest daughter was actually working in a supermarket. Robert was opening important mail in his study. 10 years ago, he had experienced a serious investment failure. He had poured all his fortune into an overseas real estate development project, and by the time he discovered it was a scam, it was already too late. Without his family's knowledge, he had been driven to the brink of foreclosure. However, he suddenly told his family that the problem has been resolved 3 years after Charles and Elizabeth's marriage. He explained that the bank agreed to renegotiate with generous terms. Since then, monthly bills labeled asset management fees had arrived, which he paid as a matter of course. That day, there was a slightly different envelope on his desk. It was a notice from Evergreen Real Estate Management. He frowned as he opened it. The words, "Final Notice of Payment Delinquency," jumped out at him. He quickly tucked it away in his desk drawer. Surely it was some mistake. He had made the payment this month. Around the same time, Victoria was parking her luxury car in the Fresh Mart parking lot. Wearing large sunglasses, she entered the store. It didn't take long to find her sister. Elizabeth was at the checkout, helping a young mother with her shopping. She picked up an apple the child had dropped and smiled kindly at them. Victoria gave her a cold look and deliberately blocked her path. "Elizabeth." Elizabeth couldn't hide her surprise. "Victoria, why are you here?" "I happen to be in the area." "So you really are working in a place like this?" Victoria's voice was full of contempt. "I can't believe it." The widow of the Foster family as a supermarket cashier. Elizabeth blushed. She was aware that customers and colleagues around them were watching. "I'm working right now. Can we talk later?" "What is there to talk about?" "You're ruining the family image because of you," Victoria raised her voice. "Every time I meet friends at the country club, I struggle to avoid the topic of you. You should find a better job." Charles would have wanted that too. At those words, Elizabeth's patience reached its limit. Don't bring up Charles's name. He wasn't the kind of person who judged people by their profession or status. Yes, that's why he remained an ordinary engineer all his life, Victoria laughed mockingly. Working hard but ending up, like this, she looked around the store with a look of disdain. Elizabeth's colleague, Sarah, approached. "Is there a problem?" "Nothing," Elizabeth answered quietly. "This person was just leaving." Victoria snorted and turned on her heel. As she left, she threw back, "Aren't you ashamed?" That evening, Elizabeth was approached by James. "Watching you work, I'd like to recommend you for the next assistant manager position. Are you interested?" Elizabeth was surprised. Thank you. Let me think about it. On her way home, she was deep in thought, torn between the option of promotion and the pressure from her family. When she arrived at her apartment, there was a call from attorney Michael Collins. Mrs. Foster, we've lost contact with Evergreen Real Estate Management. It seems the Green family's bills haven't been paid. Elizabeth sighed. I understand. Let's wait and see a little longer. She picked up Charles's photo. Just as you said, Charlie. Few people understand true value. Meanwhile, letters from Evergreen Real Estate Management were arriving one after another in the Green family's mailbox. Martha found them suspicious but didn't touch them, considering them her husband's domain. Robert opened them alone in his study, growing increasingly anxious. On Saturday afternoon, Elizabeth was relaxing in her apartment. She sat on a large sofa, absorbed in a book while drinking warm tea. The gentle sunlight coming through the window illuminated her modest but clean room. The only decorations in this space were the potted plants placed here and there, and the cherished photos of her and Charles hanging on the wall. Suddenly, the doorbell rang loudly. Elizabeth frowned. Weekend visitors were rare. Peering through the peephole, she saw her parents and sister standing there. She took a deep breath and opened the door. Mom, Dad, Victoria, what do you want? The three entered the room without waiting to be invited. Martha sighed as she took off her velvet coat. Oh, Elizabeth, do you live here? She looked around, not bothering to hide her disgust. We can find you a nice apartment. There's a lovely property in Chestnut Hill. Robert stood in the center of the living room, seemingly unsure where to sit. We're worried about your situation. We're family, so we should help each other. Victoria peeked into the kitchen and laughed quietly. Just a microwave and a hot plate? Do you really cook? Elizabeth crossed her arms and quietly asked, why did you come here? Martha stood in front of her daughter and said in a lowered voice, Elizabeth, do you intend to continue this life? There's no future in a part-time job at a supermarket. That's for me to decide, Mom. Robert spoke up. You are a daughter of the Green family. We have traditions. We have social standing. You're living such. He searched for the word. Such a modest life affects the reputation of the entire family. Thank you for saying that, Dad, Elizabeth's voice was cold. But I'm also a member of the Foster family. Victoria returned from the kitchen, having opened the refrigerator to look inside. Just milk, cheese, and vegetables? This is like a college student's refrigerator, she laughed derisively. At this rate, you'll be poor forever. Charles's insurance money will run out too. Elizabeth silently stared at the three of them. A look of determination appeared in her eyes. Enough. She would not tolerate any more insults. Will you please leave? I'm tired today. Elizabeth. Martha raised her voice. We came here because we care about you. For me. Elizabeth's voice trembled slightly. Have you ever asked me what I want? How much support did you give me when Charles died? You were even late to his funeral. Robert started to speak, but Elizabeth continued. Please, just go now. I've had enough. The three finally seemed to understand her determination. Martha pursed her lips and picked up her coat. Robert shook his head in confusion, and Victoria threw in one last comment, you'll be poor your whole life at this rate, before they left. After the door closed, Elizabeth sank into a chair and let out a long sigh. Then she picked up the phone and contacted Michael Collins. 3 days later, on Sunday, a family gathering was taking place at the Green household. Around the luxurious dining table sat Robert, Martha, Victoria, and her husband Jeremy. They didn't mention Elizabeth's absence once. By the way, Dad, Victoria said while holding her wine glass. What happened with those letters? From that ever-something company? Robert's face changed color. Nothing to worry about. Just an administrative error. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Ellie, the maid, went to answer it and soon returned. Mr. Green, there's a lawyer here named Michael Collins. He says it's important business. Tension ran through the dining room. Robert frowned but said, "Show him in." A middle-aged man in an expensive suit entered, carrying a leather briefcase. He gave a slight bow to everyone. "Excuse the intrusion. My name is Michael Collins. I'm representing Mrs. Elizabeth Foster." Martha couldn't hide her shock. "Elizabeth's? Has something happened to her?" "No, Mrs. Foster is in excellent health," Collins answered politely. "Today, I've brought important documents from her." He took out a heavily sealed envelope from his briefcase. "This is an official notification from Mrs. Foster. It contains important matters particularly concerning Mr. Robert Greene." Robert received the envelope with a tense face. Everyone in the family noticed that his hand was trembling. He opened the envelope and began to read the documents inside. As he read on, the color drained from his face. This is what?" He stumbled over his words. "What is it, Robert?" Martha asked anxiously. Robert didn't answer, just continued reading the documents. Collins quietly began to explain. "These documents are records concerning the mortgage on the Greene family home. 10 years ago, Mr. Robert fell into serious financial difficulties, and this mansion was on the verge of foreclosure." "What?" Martha exclaimed. "Robert, is this true?" Robert remained silent, hanging his head. "At that time, Mr. Charles Foster learned of the situation and negotiated directly with the bank," Collins continued. "He purchased the debt and transferred it to his company's subsidiary, Evergreen Real Estate Management. Mr. Robert continued monthly payments as asset management fees, but they were actually mortgage payments." Martha stared at her husband, speechless. Victoria sat with her mouth open, shifting her gaze from her father to the lawyer. Mr. Foster instructed that this fact be kept secret during his lifetime. He didn't want to hurt the Greene family's pride. After his death, Mrs. Foster honored his wishes and continued to accept the payments. However, Collins changed his tone. "Due to recent events, Mrs. Foster can no longer find a reason to continue this support. This notice is a final demand that payments have been stopped, and you must repay the full amount, specifically $1,500,000, within 3 months or vacate the premises." $1,500,000? Martha screamed. "We don't have that kind of money anywhere." Robert sat stunned, just repeating "why?" over and over. Victoria asked in a trembling voice, "Is this a joke? My sister couldn't possibly have that much money." Collins calmly replied, "Mrs. Foster is the heir to the late Charles Foster's estate and the sole owner of his asset management company. Mr. Foster left her assets worth $50 million when he died." $50 million, the three cried in unison. "Yes," Collins continued. "Mr. Foster was very successful in real estate investment. Despite his modest appearance, he was an extremely capable businessman." Martha let out a wordless cry and collapsed in her chair. Victoria covered her face with her hands and began to cry. "I also have a message from Mrs. Foster." Collins took out the last envelope. "True value is not found in money or social status. Human dignity and compassion are what matter. Perhaps it's time you learned this lesson." Collins returned the documents to his briefcase and quietly stood up. "I'll contact you again in 3 months. Have a good day." After he left, only a heavy silence remained in the dining room. Martha was sobbing, Robert was staring out the window with a distant look, and Victoria was trembling with shock. Their world had completely changed from this day on. For 3 days after, the Greene family was caught in a whirlwind of confusion. Martha shut herself in her bedroom, with occasional sounds of crying heard. Robert locked himself in his study, drinking old whiskey alone. Victoria called Elizabeth multiple times, but all calls went to voicemail. On the morning of the 4th day, Robert finally resolved to face reality. He gathered his wife and daughter in the living room. "We're facing a difficult situation," he said in a tired voice. "We need to come up with $1,500,000 within 3 months." Martha looked at her husband with red, swollen eyes. "How did this happen? Why did you lie for 10 years? Robert heaved a deep sigh. I was too ashamed to tell you. I thought that project was a sure thing. Everything crumbled in an instant. He covered his face with his hands. If Charles hadn't helped us, we would have been out on the street long ago. And yet, look how we treated him. Martha wiped her tears. A plain man from a middle-class family, when he was actually our savior. Victoria stared at the floor in silence. She had always looked down on Charles. Even when he died, she had only offered perfunctory condolences. And Elizabeth, how much had she hurt her own sister? What should we do? Victoria finally spoke up. We don't have that kind of money. We have to go to the bank and renegotiate the mortgage, Robert said. I plan to go tomorrow. The next day, Robert visited Boston National Bank. However, the answer he received was cruel. I'm sorry, Mr. Green. Given your age and income situation, we cannot arrange a new mortgage for you, the loan officer said apologetically. Especially considering your previous repayment history. Robert returned home with slumped shoulders. Martha and Victoria understood everything from his expression. Let's pool my savings, Victoria suggested. She worked as a high-paid lawyer, but due to her spending on luxurious vacations and high-end brands, her actual savings were less than expected. The three sat around the table and calculated their assets. Stocks, insurance, savings, all together, they amounted to only about $600,000. We're still short $900,000, Robert murmured. Victoria's husband Jeremy was also called in. He was surprised to hear the situation but offered, I'll consult with my father. However, 2 days later, he brought bad news. My father says he doesn't want to get involved in personal problems. What about our friends? Martha suggested. We have many wealthy acquaintances in society. However, each time Martha made a call, the attitude of the person on the other end changed. I'm sorry, but financially things are tight right now. Due to investments, large amounts are. For such an amount, formal procedures would be. A week passed, and the Green family's despair only deepened. For the first time, they realized how superficial the friendships they had built were. We have to go see Elizabeth, Robert finally said. We'll apologize and ask if she can help us somehow. In front of Fresh Mart, the three got out of their car. Their luxury vehicle and expensive clothing stood out in the supermarket parking lot. They nervously entered the store and looked for Elizabeth. She was at the register, packing bags for an elderly woman. Mrs. Johnson, that's everything. Take care. After Elizabeth saw the customer off with a smile, she noticed her family. Her expression stiffened for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. Mom, Dad, Victoria, what do you want? She repeated the same words as before. The three were at a loss for words. Then the store manager, James, appeared. Elizabeth, it's your break time. You can use the back room. He gave the three a wary look, but when Elizabeth said, it's okay, he nodded and left. The four entered the employee break room. It was modest but clean and bright. Elizabeth. Robert began. We've come to apologize. We were wrong, Martha was tearful. We hurt you, and we're truly sorry. I am sorry too, Victoria looked down. I was a terrible sister. Elizabeth silently looked at the three. In her eyes was more sadness than anger. Why now, she finally spoke. Because you might lose your house? Because you need money? The three couldn't answer. Indeed, they had come here because of their desperate situation. But over the past week, they had learned many things. Especially what true friendship and family bonds really mean. Elizabeth, we're genuinely remorseful, Robert said in a sincere voice. We're not here just for the money, we don't want to lose you. That's true, Martha tried to take her daughter's hand. Elizabeth pulled back slightly, but didn't completely reject her. This past week, we've learned what's truly important. I've always been jealous of you, Victoria suddenly confessed. You had something I didn't. Kindness, compassion. Charles saw that. Tears welled up in Elizabeth's eyes. She tried to say something but couldn't find the words. You don't have to forgive us, Robert said. But we want you to know. We regret our actions. And, we love you. Elizabeth finally cried. This is all I wanted. To be valued as a person rather than for monetary worth. That's what Charles taught me. After a long silence, Elizabeth took a deep breath. I have conditions, she finally said. I'm planning to resume support. But I want you all to change too. The three opened their eyes wide. Tell us anything, Robert answered immediately. I want you to participate in community service. Volunteering at nursing homes, helping at food distribution centers. I want you to learn what true value is. Martha hesitated a bit but soon answered, of course. Victoria also nodded, I will. A genuine smile returned to Elizabeth's face for the first time. And I'll continue with this job. This is my choice. The three agreed. For the first time, they respected Elizabeth's choice. A year later in spring, the Boston Community Center was full of energy. Robert Greene, wearing reading glasses, was reading to a group of children. Previously designing skyscrapers as an architect, he now read books to local children 3 times a week, occasionally sharing his experiences. Robert, you were wonderful again today, Judith, the center director, said with a smile. The children love your stories. He smiled bashfully. I'm the one learning so much from them. A few miles away at a nursing home, Martha Greene was helping elderly residents with hair care. Her deft hands and warm conversation were popular with the facility's residents. Once showing smiles only at society events, she now genuinely smiled as she styled an old woman's hair. Martha, thanks to you, I feel young again, Eleanor said, looking in the mirror. Eleanor, you've always been beautiful, Martha answered kindly. All I can do is bring that out a little. Meanwhile, in a small downtown office, Victoria Greene was providing legal consultation for New Beginnings, a support group for single mothers. Working pro bono, she offered legal advice to mothers in financially difficult situations. Thank you so much, Ms. Greene, a young mother said tearfully. Thanks to you, I was able to keep custody of my child. Victoria smiled warmly. Thank you for your courage. I'll continue to support you. At Fresh Mart, Elizabeth was looking over documents in the store manager's office. She had been promoted 6 months ago and was now entrusted with running the entire store. Her fair attitude and consideration for employees had earned deep trust from the staff. The office door was knocked, and Sarah, the assistant manager, poked her head in. Elizabeth, the representative from Heartful Community Fund, is here. Elizabeth nodded and stood up. This fund, established with part of her late husband Charles's estate, provided funding for projects supporting underprivileged families in the community. That evening, the entire family had gathered at the dining table in Elizabeth's new home. She had moved from her previous apartment but still chose a modest and warm dwelling. The table was set with homemade dishes, and laughter filled the air. Elizabeth, this stew is really delicious, Martha said sincerely. Am I getting close to Mom's cooking? Elizabeth asked with a laugh. You've already surpassed me, Martha returned with a smile. Victoria took her wine glass. Let's make a toast. To our new family. Once haughty, her eyes now held a warm light. The high-end brands and flashy accessories of before had disappeared, replaced with a simple, elegant appearance. And to Charles, Robert added. With gratitude for his teachings. Everyone clinked their glasses. Elizabeth looked out the window. In the garden were trees that Charles had loved. She thought to herself, it turned out just as you wished, Charlie. We've become a real family. Outside, the gentle spring breeze rustled the trees, announcing the arrival of a new season.